terms: abstract, pool, share, consolidate. Can somebody tell me what is that abstract, pool, share, consolidate talking about? And if you remember, I did said that for any cloud, virtualization is like step one. What is that abstract, pool, share, consolidate, guys? So, the answer is on the screen. Can somebody step up and explain it to me? How do you define virtualization? I see somebody is typing something. Managing the underlying resources. Wonderful. That's what we are doing. But how are we doing that? So if you look at picture number 1 on the left-hand side, we said operating system is the guy who manages those resources. An operating system is the guy who gives these resources to the application on demand when it needs it. But operating system is dumb. Why do I say that? Because when you have multiple applications, operating system doesn't know how to prioritize. It says whoever comes first to me, I'll give resources. We don't want that, right? But hypervisor is intelligent. That's why I say here, we have written it stop. Operating system doesn't get the resources directly. It's a hypervisor who gets resources on demand when needed. So hypervisor creates a kind of an abstraction layer, which means the control of the hardware resources is what abstract term is highlighting here. Pool, it's the job of hypervisor to pool the resources. Share it with the virtual machines. Consolidate, because you're running more than one virtual machine on a single physical server. Look at the 15% and 65%. 15% utilization versus 65, which means more ROI. Then we talked about cloud, how cloud makes it really easy. You don't have to set up your data center, you don't have to buy servers, storage, network, nothing. All you have to do is follow the Azure.com, create your isolated environment, segment it, deploy your resource. In simple terms, cloud has always been a remote data center, which means all your resources are being stored somewhere in a remote data center on a physical host. How are we offering availability? This is where we have talked about availability set and availability zone yesterday. And then we have talked about different types of virtual machines, which is where this part comes into play. And I showed you that what questions does it ask while creating the virtual machine. This is why we said start by creating your network first. Then have a virtual machine details ready. Then define the size. Then configure the redundancy, which is whether you want to go with availability set, scale sets, or availability zone. We also talked about Azure Batch, which is where we said, hey, if you're creating a movie, like a 3D movie, a lot of job has to be done with respect to image processing and rendering. Azure Batch can be a solution for you. On the call simulations. Extract, transform, load, which is for data. So whenever we talk about AI these days, data is the backbone, right? So if you want to make that data aligned, Azure Batch is a solution to go for. We saw the 6 steps, how Azure Batch really works. After that, we have talked about the app service, why developers love app service, because it gives them the choice of the programming language, .NET, .NET Core, Java, Python. And then it can allow you to create and manage any type of application, whether it is mobile application, logic apps, API, or a backend. Then we have talked about what you're dealing with it. What is web service offering? So basically, in earlier days, you were the person who would buy a server, OS, and install the application. But now, with app service, you will only concentrate on your code. That's what we have learned. But how do I define what resources I need? That's where app service plan comes into play. How do I test different versions of my code? Deployment slots. How do I run my application within my own environment? ASC. All this we have discussed yesterday. Then finally, we talked about containers. Hey, containers are no different than virtual machines because the same terms are available here: abstract, pool, share, consolidate. The first thing which I asked you to remember was virtual machines is abstracting your hardware. Containers, abstracting your operating system. A virtual machine can be your container host. Why would I go with containers? Lightweight, ultra portable, which is where we said, hey, I can move it from GCP to Azure, Azure to AWS, AWS to VMware's platform, without making any changes to the image itself. Lightweight, because container is just an application on the binary files, like we saw yesterday. It's lightweight, which means managing, powering it on, powering it off becomes really, really easy and super fast. Scalable. Containers are scalable like virtual machines. There is no limit on the number of containers that you can run on a container host, as long as you have enough resources available. Isolation. They provide isolation like virtual machines do. Some of the challenges: With the containers, how are we fixing them? This is where we have talked about Kubernetes. And then we talked about the master versus worker architecture, the diagram for Kubernetes, and then AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service, where we said this orange box is taken care of by the Microsoft, and these blue boxes is what, the green boxes is what you will be worrying about. Then finally, we have talked about different types of service offerings and a quick introduction to Azure Functions versus Logic Apps. Functions, write your own code. Logic Apps, workflow. What was the example which we saw yesterday, guys? Can somebody refresh the example for Logic Apps and Azure Functions? That will be the last one before we start our day 2. What was the use case and the example which we saw yesterday? Where can I implement Azure Function? See a few people tapping in. Azure Function versus Logic Apps. I'll give you a hint. Something like Spotify. How can I use Azure Functions with application like Spotify? How to reply on notifications. Wonderful. That's one example. For example, I said even Lazada, right? If I upload photos and videos reviewing the product, there should be a thank you email to me saying that, hey, thanks for the participation. Here you go. This is a $5 voucher for your next shopping. Thus, this can be automated with Azure Function. And the Spotify, like we said, updating the subscribers. Hey, there's a new song for the artist that you have subscribed. Listen to it now. So this can be automated with Azure Functions. And then the whole, exactly, when new music is uploaded. So Azure Functions can be implemented in 2 ways. For example, when I upload a new song, Azure Function can check if that new song is of appropriate format, if that new song matches the size, if that new song has the artist details, right? I can write a code for this, I can test it. Once I validate everything, I'm storing it in my storage, which is where my block storage comes into play, update my database, then I'm sending a notification. So checking the file, updating the subscribers, both can be done with Azure Function. Whole process can be defined with Logic Apps. So that's what we have done. So that was a quick recap. I hope everybody has downloaded this whiteboard and the design document. Let me just do a recap on the design as well, the design document which we created yesterday, and then we will stop there. So 51673 is our class. So I don't know if it's gonna be the same thing today, but yesterday post lunch we had so many people joining back to work and then busy with other commitments. So hoping I would see more participation today to when something is not as expected. Okay, just say okay here. Okay, it says you can't find it. I know where to go. Just bear with me. 51673. Okay. Any questions on the other side, guys? The pace was okay. That's what I've heard yesterday. No changes there today. So today, like I said, it's all about storage. I did give you the link yesterday on how you can go ahead and brush up your knowledge on the storage front. But if it's something new to you, we will touch base on few basics before we talk about the design factor. This is the reason why I always encourage my participants to attend AZ-104 before they come to 305. Okay? It can be